So I want to talk about something today that I find really can trip up folks who are starting their business or trying to grow their business. And that is the draw to start just working hard. And I say that because those are the people we work with, right? They self-select and we select people to come into our program who are dedicated and committed and, ready to do the thing and at all costs in some cases, which isn't always great. That's a different episode. And what they want to do is jump quickly into action, right? I want to start reaching out to people. I want to start creating content. I want to start, going to conferences. I want to start. And they end up with this huge list of things to start. And what I want to talk about today is why starting that list is not always your best move.
Yeah. I mean, let's dig into why that happens to begin with. And you're right. Folks are like, oh, I got to build pipeline. So I better
Website. It's always the website.
Better go hire a web developer.
Yeah.
It's going to build your pipeline, apparently. Right. Revise my LinkedIn profile, start doing a bunch of outreach, start creating content. Like I need to start doing all the things. And I think there's a lot of reason. We're going to get into why this is problematic in a minute, but there's a lot of reasons why people go there. I think it's kind of like the iceberg fallacy is a big part of this, where there's what's visible is what gets changed. So you're not wrong. Yeah, what people see is your website and your LinkedIn profile and your content. Like that's what's visible. So automatically you think, well, that's what I need to work on. That's what people see. That's what they're looking at. And you're not wrong. The challenge is, like, again, iceberg metaphor. There's all this stuff underneath the surface that people don't see that actually drives those messages, that drives those assets, that makes them meaningful. And so I think just a note about where I get where it's coming from. Like, I don't blame you, because that's what people are seeing, and your knee-jerk reaction is, well, let's fix that now.
Well, and your instinct to do those things isn't wrong either. What we're talking about is when to do it. And that's what we'll get into. It's just about understanding when it's the right time to jump in and do all those things. Because once you have gone through the steps that need to happen ahead of that, of course, we want you to be, firing on all cylinders and doing all the right things, right? The things that are most effective. But the real question, I think, is not, do you or don't you, but when does it happen?
Well, let's talk about what happens if you just go in and I'm sure most of you have been in the situation where you just go in and, well, let's just do it, right? Like, Carrie, enough talk, right? Like, let's take action. Let's just go and rewrite the website and rewrite the LinkedIn profile. And you go and you hire a web developer, or you do it yourself, either way. And the question that invariably comes up is, well, what do I say? Okay. I mean, who am I? What do we do? How do I put that into words? And then you have this existential crisis where, everybody seems to think that this is unique to them, which is hilarious, right? Well, what I do can't really be encapsulated into like a really, tight value proposition or slogan. Like, it's very complex, right? Like, everyone thinks that they're unique in this regard. You're not. Spoiler alert. But you end up, I think, inevitably coming face to face with this question of, who's it for? First of all, who am I targeting? And therefore, what should I communicate to them? And this is where people get stalled.
Well, and I just want to add a quick note in here as well, because I don't want to leave that without saying there's also the other challenge is that you think you know. And so you create all these assets, right? You're sure you know how to articulate what you do. So you create your website, you create your whatever other marketing assets, material, all the things that you need, your messaging. Then you go out into the real world and you have people looking at it, using it, engaging with it. And then you find out that maybe you were right in terms of what your actual offer is, right? What your solution is. But you didn't have the information you needed to be able to articulate it in a way that's going to connect with the people that you want to work with. And so now what's happening is you are rehiring that web developer, right? you're starting again, you're making adjustments, and essentially you're wasting your time and money, none of which we want you to do. So there's the I'm not sure how to make this happen appropriately, and there's the I am sure, and then I learn later on that I didn't quite hit the mark.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say those are the two common scenarios. Either you get stuck because you're not really quite sure what to say, and then therefore you come up with something fairly generic that doesn't really mean anything to anybody because you're not clear on who you're talking to. Or to your point, the second scenario is you think you know what your market wants and needs, and you think you know the language that they use, and you might not say it this way, but you're going forth and actually doing this without any kind of robust strategy exercise, assumes that you think you know. Quick story comes to mind, just to illustrate this point. George Orwell, famously author of 1984, for a book he was doing called Down and Out in Paris and London, which is, haven't read it, right? But I know this backstory, right? Which is about a tramp in Paris and London. And George Orwell's from a very kind of elite, aristocratic family in the UK and Britain and England, and didn't really know what it was like to be, down and out in Paris or London for that matter. So what does he do? He's writing a book about obviously the people that are on the lowest end of the socioeconomic ladder. And so he goes undercover as a tramp in Paris and London and actually lives, in the slums and lives the life and wears the clothes and mixes with the people to develop some empathy and understanding of what that's like to live that life, which was a far cry from the life that he lived. My point in telling this story is that you will see not only in business but in art as well these examples of people that go to great lengths to develop some empathy and to start to see the world from another perspective so they can effectively communicate that perspective and connect with audiences that share that perspective. And the same is true in business. The assumption that you make when you say, well, I know what my market wants, is actually quite arrogant, right? Because you're not them. Even if you were in the past, and certainly if you've been in their position in the past, that gives you a bit of an advantage. But if you're not currently in their position, which you're likely not by virtue of the fact that you run a consulting business, so you're therefore not your target market, I think you have to acknowledge with some humility that there is an empathy gap there. You're not them. You're not seeing the world from their perspective anymore. You're not living their day to day. You're not in their shoes. So the question then becomes, well, how do I close that empathy gap? And perhaps you don't have to go to the lengths that George Orwell went to, but you do need to do something.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the important thing, right? We talked on a previous episode about inside your business, what is the order of operations that you want to solve your problems, right? What is the bottleneck that's getting in your way? And taking that now, closer and closer to the detail of your marketing plan, we want to ask the same question, right? What is the thing that I need to know or the problem that I need to solve that is going to let me head down this path in the most effective possible way to get to the result that I'm looking for?
And just to be clear, we are crazy about this stuff. Like, we don't just teach it. We live it, we breathe it. In our business as well, we have a lot of interactions with folks in our target market. We have a lot of calls. We have a lot of touch points with our market. And here's a really common conversation that happens, at least once a week on our team is, oh, I spoke to so-and-so and they said something really interesting. Go and look at this call. Go and look at these timestamps. Go and check out this recording and listen to how this person talked about X, problems they're facing, opportunities, where they want to take their bit, whatever it is, right? We're constantly looking at the language that our clients and our prospects, our market is using to describe the pains they're facing, experiencing, the problems they're facing, the goals they want to achieve, how they articulate all of the above, the specific language they use, frames of reference. we're obsessive about that stuff because that's what actually makes for great marketing, right? When we go down to write something, whether it's a LinkedIn profile or a post or whatever, we want to be armed with all of this data, all this voice of customer. That's not it's not a a static exercise. We do it once, it sits on a shelf, but it's dynamic and constantly being updated.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think, that might sound a little bit overwhelming, especially someone who's starting. It's worth recognizing that we've been doing this for years and we have the systems and processes in place to be able to kind of gather that information and pay attention to it, and then most importantly use it, right? Move it down the line into the way that we connect with people and talk to people in the future. But in reality, there are two phases to this exercise, right? There is doing enough of it right at the beginning before you start taking all those actions that we were talking about, so that you are clear about who you're talking to. You're clear about what their problem is. You're clear about how they feel about their problem. We skip that part sometimes, right? We're so focused on the problem and the solution that we're not paying attention to how they feel about it, what it's doing to them personally, how it's keeping them up at night, what's happening in the world around them. So you want to get clear enough on all of that so that you can start, right? So that you can start doing all the things. And that doesn't have to be a months and months long process. There's a very particular way to, talk to enough of the right types of prospects that you get the information that you need. Then yes, you start doing the thing, right? And recognizing that doing the thing isn't just about doing the thing, as you're saying, doing the thing. So having the conversations, putting out content and seeing how people respond to it, reaching out and connecting with people and understanding what kind of connections you're able to make. What that allows you to do then is refine that work that you did at the front end. And so if you're early on in your business and you haven't, you're the person who just wants to jump in or who is sitting back and has no clients yet, but you're trying to build this big fancy website, then what we're talking to you about is phase one, where you need to do enough of that work, enough of that research to understand that to understand enough that you're confident in moving forward and that you're reducing the opportunity to build this rework into your life where you're going to come back and do it again later. And if you're later on in your business and you have all those things, then what we're saying to you is you got to keep listening, right? Now is the time to go back to the well and pay attention and maybe set aside the assumptions that you have and really listen to what people are saying so that you can continue to refine what you're doing and therefore become more and more effective.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit more about why doing this, what we call strategy work up front, customer research, customer listening, positioning, messaging, etc., is so important, is because inevitably you will take this to market. Inevitably you will put up the website, you will revise a LinkedIn profile, you will publish content. Like inevitably you will do these things. And then if it works, fantastic. And certainly by doing the strategy work up front, you maximize your chances of it working. But when it doesn't work, then the problem becomes if you haven't done the strategy work, you have no real basis from which to iterate. You're now just making things up. You're now just guessing. Let me just and there are people who routinely, weekly, monthly change your LinkedIn profile. And on a whim, with no real basis, no real strategy, no real just, well, I want to do this now, right? And so you have a lot of people, and you're listening, I know you're listening, who are just making changes at random and hoping that this next change will stick. And of course, it rarely does because there's no underlying strategy. If there is an underlying strategy and you run a campaign, and I don't mean for a day, right? I don't mean like you put up a LinkedIn post and then nobody buys. I mean, you actually see through a strategy, which is a separate conversation, and it doesn't get you the results you're looking for. Well, now you can look at the underlying strategy and go, well, where did we miss the mark here? Is it the market? Is it the offer? Is it the message? What did we not catch in our customer research? And you can solve that problem at a strategic level, which I promise you is far more effective and efficient than just making things up at the surface level, at the tactical level, and hoping that they work. Because you can spend a lot of time, and this is the reality for a lot of folks, you can spend a lot of time just changing up the tactics, changing up the messaging, on a whim, making all kinds of assumptions about what worked and why it didn't work and what to change. And you can spin that way for months and years before finally giving up. And there's a better way. And we'll wrap this up on this point here. You mentioned a few times the word clarity, Carrie. And I think that's the word I want people to really keep in mind for this discussion is when you are ready to, well, here's how you'll know you're ready to write the website, write the LinkedIn profile, publish content, do all the marketing tip of the iceberg exercises is when you have clarity. And I have a unique position in the 90-day pipeline where I'm the person you have to get through if you're a client. I'm the person you have to get through to get to implementation. We have a 2-part strategy phase in the program, and then we have an implementation phase where you do all the things, all the tactical implementation stuff. I'm the person you have to get through to get to implementation. And I do a strategy review with clients where essentially what I'm looking for and what I'm grilling our clients on is, are you clear? Do you know who you're going after? Do you have a clear and specific target market? Do you know what their problem and their pain is? And are you making it up? Or have you gotten that data from the market itself? Do you understand what they're currently doing to solve those problems? Have you developed a clear and viable solution to those problems that differentiates from other options available in the marketplace? And do you know why they should buy it? Among other things, there's a longer list, right? But what I'm looking for in asking those questions and stress testing and evaluating folks' positioning and messaging and strategy is, are you clear? And if you're clear, I'm good to have you proceed to implementation. And if you're not clear, we're going to go back and do some work because I don't want you wasting time building out tactics and implementing systems that are built on a shoddy foundation.